at face value, Andrew Tate used to say a lot of kind of good things. Men should work hard and men should do these things. I agree. They should. You should work hard. You should be physically fit. You should try and produce value, blah, 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 all those kinds of things. But what's his motivation? What is Andrew Tate trying to do? Andrew Tate is trying to glorify Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is trying to make Andrew Tate richer. Andrew Tate is trying to extort others, and he literally did it as a career, extorting women to amass wealth for himself. There is nothing in there that says strong masculine leader, because a strong masculine leader doesn't care about himself. He understands that the way that he actually gets fulfilled and actually makes real impact is by doing it for others. And that's what a character like Andrew Tate misses, and that's why he's leading so many men astray. It's because they think that, oh, to be a good man means you got to get rich and have sex with as many women as possible. That's not masculinity. That's selfish teenage mentality.
Welcome back to Raising Game Changers podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. George Hayworth is a co-founder and a co-host of the Present Fathers podcast. George, welcome to Raising Game Changers, man.
Man, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation, and yeah, let's raise some game changers, you know?
Absolutely. It's a fun topic for me. That's why I started this podcast. But you guys started an interesting pod, and I listened to it a lot. You are up to, I think, 97 episodes now, and you had some phenomenal guests on. So I wanted to start off by talking to you about the backstory behind the pod. Like, what brought the four of you together to start this podcast, and how did it come about, man?
Yeah, so first and foremost, you know, the Present Fathers podcast it's four of us. We're all really good friends. We've been you know, kind of each other's battle buddies for decades now. Two of them are twin brothers, so they've known each other their whole lives, but the rest of us are kind of the friends of the twins, right? But, you know, really around the 2020, 21 time frame, we were kind of just looking at our country and thinking, man, what a mess. What can we do about this, right? And so we started with humble beginnings of, hey, we have limited time and resources. Let's start a podcast. We can focus on fatherhood and at least try and put out positive ideas and tactics and methods for other men to at least have a place that they can kind of learn some good, you know, methods to be better fathers, but also kind of hear those ideas. And you know, we thought we would initially struggle to get guests, but we've been extremely blessed. We have had just guest after guest after guest that are just incredible people. So it's really morphed into being really a one-stop shop for fathers to come and learn about better ways to be a better dad. Because a lot of it isn't necessarily that you're a bad guy. It's just you weren't taught effectively. So what better way to learn than hearing from some of the best people on the planet when it comes to parenting? So our whole mission there is just to empower men to be better fathers, because we believe that by building men up, they in turn can build strong families, and that makes a cultural impact. So, you know, it's way bigger than us, and hopefully, you know, over time we can really make a cultural effect in the country. But that's really where we started, and we've just grown from that point forward. We just put it in motion, and little by little, just try to get better every episode.
100%, man. And you guys just crossed 40,000 subscribers, and it was a long journey to get to like 3,000, and then like a month or two to get to 40. Like, what a just, you know, immediate jump.
Yeah, I don't know if the election had anything to do with it. We'll see. You know, suddenly our fatherhood focused podcast started getting a lot more traction. Go figure. You know.
Well, things like when PBD was talking on his podcast about the stats for like fatherless homes, that kind of strikes a nerve right away. Like, you see, all the bad things happen. The majority of those people come from fatherless environments where there's not a father. My father, who was raised without a father, kept always telling me that, like, you're lucky that you have me, because I didn't have me. You know, I didn't have a father role model figure that I could learn from. And at the same time, he always told me, like, I'm going to screw things up because I had no role model to look after. But I wanted to ask you about some of the key takeaways from your pod, because I'll share two of mine, right? The two of the biggest things that struck me in your podcast. One I posted on X, that was from Chrisman, when he talked about this longitudinal study from Harvard, which blew my mind, right? Like, the number one common denominator in successful people, I would think it's like all these things that could be, whether it's a two-family household, whether it's you know, good education, whether it's high-end education, right? It's none of these things. It's actually fun and loving family, right? Literally, like having a loving family and having fun while you're at it, like joyful environment at home is the number one denominator, even in like military men, where you wouldn't think that at all should be applicable, right? But no, it is. And the second thing that I remember, because I'm raising an athlete, my son is very much into hockey. You guys had Chris Singleton on, and he had that phrase that Dustin told me, so I had to go look to listen to the episode, because he developed a nonverbal communication with his son post games, where if his son wears his hat forward, we're okay to talk about the game, that, but if it's backward, leave me alone, right? So that was an awesome moment for me, because I talk to my son after games all the time, and I sometimes shouldn't. Sometimes I should lay off of him instead of coming to him with like advice right away. Hey, we should have done this differently. You should have went for that puck over there. And sometimes it's not good. So we developed a nonverbal system of communication with him, where he lets me know if he's carrying two of his sticks, then he's okay to talk. If he's carrying just one of his hockey sticks and I'm carrying the other, mom's carrying the other, leave me alone. Right? That's a nonverbal communication we developed, because he has a main stick and a backup stick in case the main one breaks. So depending how many sticks he grabs at the end of the game, he tells me whether we can talk or not. And it worked great. It's phenomenal advice.
Yeah, that's a good one for sure. He also added, if they are willing to talk, he talked about how like dads often are the reason kids will quit a sport is because the dad is too intense about it. And so he kind of gave this framework of, asking them a series of questions instead of only giving critiques, right? And so it's kind of like, number one, did you have fun? Did you have a good time? Yeah, what was your favorite part, right? Or and then the next one is like, what do you think maybe you need to improve, right? And kind of asking them the question instead of just telling them you need to do better. And then closing it out with a positive. Hey, what did you do well that game, right? Or that event? And I actually took that and ran with that with my daughter. She's doing horse riding, and at the time she was getting really frustrated because it's an animal and it does what it wants sometimes. And that was a great framework for me to ensure that I didn't get like overly critical about it with her. And, it's been something she's still doing years later. So, I'll definitely use that as one of my like, top 5 or 6 there. The next one that really stuck out, and I think it's just so well said, for so many men out there like your father who didn't have a dad around. And it relates to legacy. Nick Freitas brought up the point how, maybe you didn't come from a good legacy. Maybe you didn't inherit something you can be proud of. Okay, it just starts with you. You get to be the one to forge that new chapter, that new story for your entire family, and potentially hundreds of years from today, lives will be better because of the work you did with your life today. And that's an immense power that we get as fathers, and I think that's probably maybe the best clip we've ever had on the show. We can link the reel to that one, but that was really stuck with me. And I think a lot of guys can really resonate with that, because there's many of us who came from families that were not exactly proud of everything we inherited, right? Well, we get to just start fresh. So I'm sure you had a follow-up to that one.
Two things I wanted to say about that. Yeah, first of all, I do want to listen to that episode with Nick. I follow him on X. He's an interesting character for sure. And second is, I'm going to share that episode of Singleton with you guys with a few of my hockey fathers, because you're so right. I see it all the time, how much they do such disservice to their kids by putting so much pressure on them, especially in the hockey environment. It's so competitive at that level where they are right now. They're like free agents. They go from club to club. They sign contracts already. They're 10 years old. So parents, we invest so much into hockey. It's a lifestyle. It's literally lifestyle, because we travel with the team all the time. It's nonstop travel. It's nonstop practices. So parents, when they put up so much effort into it, they obviously want to see their kids succeed. And it's not for everyone, because some kids are just naturally more gifted. Some kids have physicality to them. Like my son loves contact. Well, that's a great feature for a hockey player who just likes hitting things, likes getting hit. It's not so great for some kids that are there, but they don't like getting hit. It's not a good sport for them. But their parents love hockey, so they put them into that sport, and they expect things of them. So I'm actually going to share Chris Singleton's episode with them, and kind of like, because it's hard to say that to them. It's hard to convey, hey, you're not doing your kids any favors, because they're always are very guarded. People don't take criticism well. We know that.
Well, it's just kind of the idea that, what percentage of kids are actually going to go pro in their sport, right? It's like less than 1%, right? Yeah, it's like a fraction of a percent. So what are the valuable lifelong lessons? I love sports. I think sports are one of the best ways to teach kids, hard work, discipline, teamwork, pushing yourself past adversity. Like it's a healthy way to learn the sting of defeat and how to cope with failure and disappointment, right? Because it's a controlled environment. There's so many more valuable lessons that even if your kid is maybe the worst one on the team, they're going to learn lifelong skills that sets them up to be a successful adult. It's far beyond the game, right? Now, it's of course we want to win. Winning's fun. It feels good to win, but that's not the lesson. The lesson isn't victory. It's all the things it takes to make victory a possibility. And I think that's where a lot of dads, they just want to see their kids win so bad, which is good in and of itself. But we also have to remember to like slow down and pause and kind of see the big picture. And I think sports is one of those things where we just naturally gravitate to so intensely as men. We just, I want to pull every little, nook and cranny and make them the best they can be. And it's just overwhelm, right? They're still kids, even at 10, 11, 12 years old.
I always tell my son, you either win or you learn. And I always tell him, like, what did we learn today? Every loss, I don't tell him we lost. I'm like, what did we learn today? That's all about learning. And I always tell him that when you win, okay, we didn't learn anything today. We just won. Basically, it's easy to win. It's painful to lose. And also, there's so much to it when you are the person, you are the reason the team lost. The pressure that goes on you, like I could have made that save at the end, or I could have made that goal, I could have made that pass, and I didn't, and that's the reason we lost or didn't have a chance to win. And going through that emotionally, dealing with that pressure, and then you can see how it translates out in life. It's phenomenal. It's like a training module for the real life world. You're literally training your kids to deal with adversity out there by putting them in adversity in sports environment. And I did a lot of research on what it takes to raise the next Elon Musk, let's say. And there's one thing that all the great ones have, is that adversity. Like it or not, unfortunately, no great man was forged out of immense, easy life. Just not how it works. And I will tell you, for instance, no parent wishes that for their kids, but after we had an adverse situation, which I'll tell you right now about in our family, with my son, I started thinking, wow, we got to create this. So my son, he got himself 10 chicks, little chickens, right? He got himself 10 chicks, and he was taking care of them for like a month. They were in the crate in my house, under the lamps, growing up, and then they got big, so it was time to take them outside. So I ordered the crate, but by the time the crate arrived, we decided to build him a little shed, right? So we built him the shed. We covered all the bases. We closed the doors. We have a husky, so the dog doesn't get to them, right? I had no idea that hawks will attack him. So we actually made sure we created windows for them to get fresh air. 2 days later, 2 days later, my son was the first one to go out there. He feeds them in the morning. He came out to a massacre, like literal massacre. Like, so blood, guts, feathers everywhere. 2 hawks in there, killed all the 10 chickens. And he was 8 years old when he saw that. He matured overnight through that tragedy, right? So, but then, of course, I had to kind of put it in perspective. I'm like, it's okay, son. You just had 12 chicken wings yesterday, It's just chickens.
Right.
We eat them. It's the cycle of life. I make sure he watches, he is allowed to watch only 2 shows on TV. One is Shark Tank, and then also the Nature Channel. So he knows how nature works. He understands the life cycle of life. It takes life to feed life. It's brutal. So, but that adversity that he suffered at 8 years old, like that adverse reality where he witnessed that, he matured. He got stronger for it as a man. So, thinking back, I'm like, we didn't plan for this. It's kind of cruel to plan something like that. But I'm glad it happened. And I talked to my wife. I'm like, if it didn't happen, it's almost like we should have made it happen. If you think about it from parental perspective, like adversity is crucial. And sports is a great way to mimic, to create adversity for kids. Because they're gonna see a lot. And then also, there's a difference in team sports and personal sports. So personal sports, you kind of like just you on that mountain. The pressure's all on you, all the eyes on you. In team sports, there's a lot of locker room relationships being built. A lot of locker room talk. Like right now, the coach already told parents, you're no longer allowed to be in the locker rooms. You're done. Because I want them to start building that man-to-man relationship now. Where once you guys in the locker room, it interferes with that. Kids aren't maturing the way I want them to mature. So there's a lot to be said about sports. I agree with you 100%. But let's go to the takeaways from the pod. So I mentioned the 2-1, right? The Chris Singleton one and Chrisman. And you guys had some awesome guys. Matt Bordeaux is one of my favorites, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Matt's a great guy.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal dude. And he's transforming education in this country. He started with Tim Kennedy, what is it called? Apogee?
The Apogee program, yeah.
Apogee program. They've got over 100 schools now.
Yeah, I think so.
What's your take on education right now? How do you view it? You guys, you've learned a lot by doing these podcasts.
Yeah, we've talked a lot of kind of alternate education, kind of experts and founders. I think our conveyor belt system is kind of broken, right? And especially now, so much in school is beyond education and teaching how to think, and it's telling people what to think, right? And that's essentially just creating generations of, lemmings, right? And, real education is to have debate, to have controversy, to have to challenge what you believe and why, especially as you get older, right? But I mean, now even go through the system up to, college, and it's basically just a indoctrination factory, right? And it's, oh, think our way or else. And in reality, universities used to be the battleground of debate, right? It was essentially the proving ground for the smartest minds on the earth to challenge ideas and expand what, human knowledge can do, right? And instead, it's kind of become the opposite. So, that's just my personal take. I don't send my daughter to public school. We send her to a very small private Christian school here on purpose because we don't want her learning a lot of the nonsense that comes with government education. And make no mistake, it's not public school, it's government school. We'll see if the current administration can change some of that. I don't know. It's a pretty big beast. It's probably not going anywhere. Most people are conditioned now to want to outsource their kids' time to a school. Basically, it's daycare for them. And that I think that's just culturally a pretty big problem. I don't know if we fix that in a single generation, but I think there is a resurgence of people wanting to homeschool, and I think there's a lot of guys like Matt Beaudreau and Ryan Delk who are kind of building these alternative options that I think will start to gain a lot of traction. And that's going to be powered also by AI and things like that. You'll need less resources to provide quality education in less time. And in reality, I think we're moving into this new world where our kids need to learn how to learn. That is the most important skill that they can develop. So, formal education or degrees is almost irrelevant because it's going to come down to the people who can just adapt the fastest. Because I think we're about to have this explosion of kind of life fundamentally changing the way we live day to day. I think there's going to be a lot more free time. I think AI isn't going to solve every problem, but it's going to create a lot of new space that doesn't exist. And the people who just adapt the quickest are going to dominate the future. And when I say dominate, I mean in the sense of, rise to the top and be able to amass wealth and, have, excess time and resources, things like that. I don't mean to control other people, but just to take advantage of the opportunity.
I agree with you 100%. I think the future actually is going to be very, very divisive in terms of there's going to be very successful people and there's going to be millions of people on universal basic income. Because those who can't figure out how to actually leverage AI, how to change themselves, we had that already in society when the Industrial Revolution came about.
That's right. Yeah.
A lot of people were left outside of the workforce because they didn't adapt fast enough. Sam Altman, the founder of OpenAI, a controversial figure, I'll give you that, but he does speak some wise things sometimes. So when they launched ChatGPT in November of 2023, immediately right after that, he was at Davos, the annual WF meeting, right? And some freaked out rich people were asking him, hey, what does that mean for our kids, right? You just rolled out this AI. And his answer was actually very spot on. They were talking about which traits do you think will have to develop in kids now? And he mentioned 3. He actually said 4, but these 3 main ones. So he said resilience, adaptability, and ability to learn and apply new things quickly. Those are the 3 main pillars that kids need to have, or teenagers or adults need to develop and work on in the age of AI. Because things are going to be developed and things are going to be changing at such a speed of rate now that you have to roll with the times, which means stress, right? Because change is always stressful. We have to be able to control our emotions, learn fast, and apply what you learn immediately, which is, the best way to learn is just do it. And that's what the schools teach the opposite. My son, when COVID hit, COVID was a blessing in disguise for me in that perspective. My son was going to one of the best private schools in New York City, Basis, and when COVID hit, everything got paused. He was going remote learning, and this book came out. It's on my shelf there. It's called The Future is Faster Than You Think by Peter Diamandis. And when I read that book, and it's about convergence of exponential technologies and what that convergence means. Like, think about this. Think about like biotech and AI merging. revolution in medicine, you know? Things like that are about to start happening finally once AI catches up in its prowess. Right now, it's not there just yet, but it's coming up. For instance, DeepSeek that got rolled out just a few days ago, people are freaking out. What just happened yesterday is mind-blowing because DeepSeek just rewrote itself and got twice as fast in one day, just yesterday. So now we've got to the point where AI can just improve itself exponentially, right? So I think it's going to be in history books marked as the beginning of the new era. Yesterday, as AI can rewrite itself and get much better at certain things, like it got twice as fast overnight, that's where we're at now. Now, combining that with other technologies is the exponential tech. And when I read this book, and I realized everything they're teaching kids in schools today goes against what they should be learning. Like learning by doing, learning to adapt, learning to control their emotions, growing a growth, what's called the growth mindset, right? Understanding that you can learn anything as long as you put in the time and effort. And that means you can't grade kids based on benchmark testing. Hey, take this test. You got to grade kids and reinforce them based on effort and individual progress. That's not what schools are doing. Well, some are now. Micro schools like Apogee, like there's another one. And by the way, their micro schools growth is phenomenal. It's spectacular. It's absolutely mind-blowing. There's thousands of them now. Just a couple years ago, there was just a few. Because of the demand, because more and more people like you and I realize, hey, government schools, aren't doing what they should be doing. And also, another realization is that our kids are going to have to compete on the global stage.
That's right. Yeah.
The Russian schools and the Chinese schools, they've adopted. They've completely gone away from this factory model of education. They're doing what the Finnish did. The Finland School of Education, they went from number 25 to number 1 in just 12 years.
Yeah, we should study what they're doing.
Yeah, so it's not impossible to do it here. Absolutely. Absolutely, they should be studying what they're doing here in the United States. And now with this new government, because Elon is part of it, Elon started his own school for his kids, right, at Astra.
Yeah, the SpaceX thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, at Astra. And his kids will go into literally the best private school in America. It's called the Mirman School for Gifted and Talented Bel Air. And he pulled them out of there in 2014, started his own little school for his kids. And Chrisman, I believe, was part of that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, he was part of that at Astra initiative initially. And now at Astra actually has an online platform as well. You can just sign your kid up. But, online is a little bit differently, I believe. Let's go back to talking about your key takeaways, because I enjoy your pod a lot, man. You guys have some good guys on, and there's a good synergy in that podcast. I enjoy it quite a lot.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The next one that for me is potentially the biggest takeaway, at least personally, that had such a huge impact on me was with Nick Lavery, and he was talking about the importance of emotional regulation and how, from a perspective of special operations, that's like the number one thing they look for, right? The mark of who's probably going to be the best on the team isn't necessarily the fastest, stronger, best shot in the team or whatever. It's going to be the guy that has the most emotional regulation. And we kind of expanded upon that. Like, so if it's that important for like combat operations, how much more should we be using emotional regulation as men in our marriages and with our children? And for me, it was like just this moment that it pierced straight to my heart of, ooh, George, that's a huge area of growth for you, brother. You lose your temper a lot. Time to rein that in. And so that was kind of a good moment for me to kind of have that, hard to swallow pill. And, that for me, I think that has played such massive dividends in the past 12 months. Because that was about 12 months ago he said that to me. Just completely changed the way I approach my role as a husband and father for the better. And, my marriage has improved drastically as a result, right? If I'm truly remaining stoic, it's a lot easier for my wife to feel safe at home, right? It's easier for my daughter to come to me with problems, or even if she is in trouble for something she did wrong, right? She's not going to cower and hide from me. She's going to understand that I'm not going to lose my temper about it, right? So I just think that's something that we've lost as modern men for the most part, and we misunderstand what true stoicism is. We think it's the absence of emotion, but in reality, it's actually control over emotions. So you still feel them, you're a human being, but you respond to situations instead of reacting. And I was a reactionary guy. Something would happen, I'd get real big, real mad, and I'm going to like squash the situation. Well, that's a terrible way to have a strong family culture. And so that was an area that I had to grow in a lot. And, I got credit to Nick Lavery for that incredible, concept that he really laid out in that episode.
That's awesome, man. I have a rule now. Me and my wife never have a serious conversation until I come from gym. That's my rule. That's how I fix that. Because I used to like get emotional, get upset, and later look back at it like, what's wrong with you, man? Like, why would you get upset about that? She's just going through some difficulties. Like, you gotta. So now we have a rule. Like, all conversations take place after gym, after I come from gym. Because after from gym, for some reason, not for some reason, we know exactly for what reasons, right? All the endorphins are going through me. Is this biological feeling? I'm a completely different person. I can reason. I am not emotional. Things don't get to me for some reason. I'm completely. And also, to that point, I remember that phrase to your point that you just mentioned, I remember the phrase by Jordan Peterson, who said that a docile man is not a good man. A good man is a savage who's got that under voluntary control. And I always keep telling that to my son, like, I'm purposefully raising an educated savage in you who's going to be that under control, because weak men are not good men. They can't protect, they can't serve, they can't do things that are required of them. And that we should feel pity for those men that are raised that way. We shouldn't kind of like look down upon them. We should understand that unfortunately they didn't have good leadership in their family who understood those principles, and maybe you can help them see the light and become. Because I was also raised in a way where, Soviet army, my dad was in the Soviet army, like it's just everything, and I realized like
Intensity, yeah.
oh yeah, and men don't cry type bullshit,
That's right.
And I've learned that's not good, because then you have heart attack at 50 and you're done.
That's right.
That's what it leads to, basically, is bottling up emotions all the time. And then you leash out, your frustration comes out on you when you bottle it all up. It's not healthy, it's not good, and it's not a sign of weakness. That was literally number one paradigm shift for me to learn as a mature adult, that it's not a sign of weakness to actually be a little bit, vulnerable.
Yeah.
To allow yourself to be vulnerable. And I'm teaching that to kids now. It's phenomenal that we have this medium of information learning. Mm-hmm. How much I've learned through podcasts is unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's hour-long master classes every time,
Every time. And it's phenomenal. Like right now in the car, we travel a lot for hockey. So it's always podcasts. It's always...
Love it.
It's always podcasts in the car. And when it's just me and my son, I let him listen to Joe Rogan. I'm okay with the curse words. I told him that Joe is being his authentic self, and it's okay. Yep. And like Joe Rogan is nonstop in my car with him, especially certain episodes with certain smart dudes, like when Eric Weinstein comes on. And they talk about, I want my son to start listening to conversations that require deep level of thought, kind of get used to that from an early age. And also that it's okay. Yeah, that it's okay not to know shit. And like he would ask me, like, what's that about? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. Let's pull over somewhere, stop. Let's Google it. Let's find out what he's talking about. It's okay not to know things. We don't know a lot of things. We don't have to pretend. Like, remember back in the day before Google was about, you could just bullshit your way out of anything.
Yeah. My wife and I were joking about this last night, actually. We're like, do you remember what life was like before Google? Like, you had to go find an encyclopedia and try and find the data. And, like, there were so many things that you just didn't know because you're like, well, I wish I knew that, but got to carry on.
Or, like, bullshit artists like myself who grew up just, like, making shit up. I used to just make things up when I was a teenager because I didn't realize how bad lying was.
Yeah.
And, like, just trying to win the argument by, like, just coming up with stats. Just to try to win the argument.
The crazy myths that kids would say at school. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, all that was part of our upbringing. But at the same time, I miss a little bit of, how do you say that?
The mystery of things.
Not just the mystery, that we were just so free. We weren't looked after constantly.
Yeah.
I would leave my house in the morning, come back late at night. Nobody knew where the hell I was. There was no cell phones.
Yeah.
My parents would have to ask me about my day later, where right now I feel like I'm a babysitter to my kids all the time.
That's right.
And we're trying to figure out ways to actually end it. And we'll see. We're going to try a few different things. What are some of the lessons you bring home from your pod, from what you've learned? You're raising a daughter. She's 9 now, from what I know.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yeah.
Like we talked with you online about, for instance, those 25. What do you call them? Forgot that. Just slipped my mind. Like the spotlight effect, the primacy, the recency, the thinking patterns. You know, where like
Oh yeah, like the logical fallacies or things like that. Yeah,
logical
yeah,
fallacies. Yeah.
yeah. I don't have them all memorized, but it's definitely good to like model those for your kids and help them understand that. Yeah,
Well, a few ones are easy. The ones that I talk to my son about is like the spotlight effect. I always tell him like, don't think people are thinking about you. Everybody thinks people are thinking about them. Nobody's thinking
right.
about you. You are thinking about you. They're thinking about them. It's called the spotlight effect. I showed them
Yep.
the literature. I explained it to them like, you don't need to worry about people ever thinking about you because nobody does.
Yeah,
You know,
it's good.
and the same thing with primacy and recency. Explained that to him. Very easy for kids to understand. And then I told him, based on these 3 examples, there's 22 more. You know, you will learn them as you go. There's a lot of these fallacies, like the bias, confirmation bias effect, where we
Right.
always look for things to confirm what we already believe. And it's like you got to be mindful of that. That's how our brain works. Evolutionarily, it evolved this way to always look for things to confirm your beliefs, and you fall into this trap. And you have to actually have cognitively place yourself outside of that comfort and look for things that prove you wrong in order to be able to question yourself. You know, but
That's
it's
right.
this, it's a constant work. It's not easy. You know, thinking critically takes a lot of brain power, and that's why people don't like doing it. And you know, evolutionarily, we evolved to think in patterns to conserve energy.
Yep.
And thinking critically, you got to think not in patterns. You got to question things all the time. So tell me some of your like what you brought home from the pod into your raising of your daughter, or from the things you've learned that you apply like on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. I think one of the things I just kind of learned as just by sheer dumb luck, I guess, you know, doing the podcast, I thought, oh, we're going to provide value to other people. And I think in reality, it's maybe done more value to me, right? And I don't mean that as like, oh, I'm some selfish guy, but I'm getting to sit down with all of these incredible people every single episode, right? And we're asking them on the show, or they're asking to be on the show because they're quite literally an authority on something that really matters, right? And I'm able to just extract wisdom and experience and knowledge from expert after expert after expert. And so I realized very quickly, like, wow, this is a moment to be very self-aware. Like that moment that I described with Nick Lavery, that was self-awareness, realizing when he said that, I know he wasn't saying it to attack George. Like he probably had no idea that I needed to hear that. He was just making a good point because it was on topic to what he was speaking to. But man, I was self-aware and I was like, ooh, I need that. That was for me. And I think if more men did that, your life would drastically improve pretty quickly. It doesn't feel good in the moment to be like, ooh, dang, I do suck at that. I need to work on that. But once you get over that little hump, I mean, that's how growth actually occurs. That's how, you know, you break down these logical fallacies. You stop lying to yourself, right? And that's something that I've gained through it. Just kind of, I recognize very early that, hey, I have an incredible opportunity to become a better guy every time we do one of these episodes in some aspect of my life. I don't have to agree with everything the guest says. I get to disagree with almost everything. But if there's one nugget of wisdom I can get from them, I need to take that and run with it because, you know, they've, you know, put a lot of work into learning what they've learned. And that's highly valuable, right? Back to like education, you know, that's way more valuable than any education I've received formally. That, you know, these master classes essentially with experts. And like as an example, one of those that I've really internalized, I read her books first, and then we got her on the podcast. You know, she was gracious to give us her time. Dr. Meg Meeker. The 2 books I read from her are Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, and then the other one is called Hero. But she highlights and is a huge advocate for the words of a father carry incredible weight with children, even through adulthood. So she even credits her own dad believing in her. That's the only reason she ever became a doctor in the first place. She had been turned down from medical school over and over and over, and she was about to give up. And she overheard him being like, no, I believe that she's going to make it. She's a smart girl, and she's going to get to medical school. And then eventually she did, right? It gave her the courage to keep going. But she really drives that point home, how father's role matters so much. And it's not necessarily from all the things you do, but it's you breathing life into your children, casting vision for them. Hey, you're going to be a great kid. You give them the hope that they can't necessarily see themselves. And you're not lying to them, but you're building them up so that they can become the greatest version of themselves. And it's not your desire for them. It's what they have aptitude in, right? So if your kid is really good at the arts or something, you're not going to try and force them to become an engineer, but you're going to give them the hope and courage to keep growing in the way they need to. And back to your point about how the lack of a father creates all these societal issues, right? Crime, substance abuse, divorce rates, suicide rates, they all just exponentially increase if a father isn't present. And I think a lot of that is those words, right? They never got those powerful words from their dad to say, I believe in you, I'm proud of you. And those little things consistently over time, no one's going to write a book about you maybe, but your child is going to become a whole adult capable of being their own person, independent and confident, to become the person they need to be, right? And that is real legacy. That makes generational impact. So, I think just reading the books from Dr. Meg Meeker and then being able to speak with her on our podcast just really solidified for me how intentional fathers have to be with every word they use. And you need to be very giving of those affirmations, right? Again, we're not going to lie to them. We're not going to just give them, flowery language because it's gentle or whatever. We're going to actually speak truth, but give them vision that they can latch onto, because they're these tiny little minds and the world is a scary place. And so your, intention with them, with your words and belief, helps build them into strong adults. So that's for boys and for daughters, right?
That's awesome. And if you think about it, again, man, did we miss that in our society, that knowledge that was there actually, kind of. And then, again, being mad conspiratorially minded, I always think like it's not an accident that was taken away. The feminism movement where, women should go out in the workforce instead of being stay-at-home moms. My wife has 3 degrees, and guess what she loves doing the most? Being home with the kids. And we on school right now, so she's always home. She's taking care of them. She loves it the most, way more than being in the office or doing work or any of this nonsense. That she, growing up, was raised to believe that's what she's destined. This is literally the coolest thing to do, right? It's making money, be in the office. Well, she tried that. And guess what? Hated it. Loves being at home, raising with it just takes away from the things that you actually are biologically enjoying doing.
Yeah, it's fundamentally flawed in its logic, and I understand why it existed in the first place, right? It was a reaction to bad male leadership, straight up. You can really flick the booger at the men there, right? How many bad husbands had to exist for women to be like, enough of this, right? So, take some accountability, right? But it's such a lie, it's such a trap that is forced on women, right? If you want to choose to go into work because it's what you really want to do, knock yourself out, right? That should be what feminism is about. But instead, it's morphed into this thing where women believe they don't have value unless they join the workforce, that they are utterly worthless unless they work for someone else that isn't their family. And in reality, what we've asked modern women to do is be full-time male professionals and full-time perfect mothers and wives. It's impossible. I couldn't do that, right? So something has to give. And so at its base level, it's already a false promise, right? It sounds great. It sounds like you're caring for women and empowering women and all that kind of stuff. If you, again, are a woman listening to this and you want to work, great. If that's what you've chosen for yourself because it's what you believe in, knock yourself out. I'm not knocking that. However, when my wife left her job, you know who gave her the most grief about not working? It wasn't men. It's all the other women in her life who are making her feel like she's a failure now because she's prioritizing being a stay-at-home wife and mother to raise our daughter and bless our home and amplify. I mean, I couldn't do what I'm doing professionally without my wife's support. It would all collapse. There's no way I could stay on top of everything I need to. I mean, she helps me out with so much stuff across the board that, I can't give her enough credit. And to act like that isn't providing massive value for our family and what our future will look like is such an insult, and it's so intellectually dishonest, right? Because it doesn't mean that she's an idiot or stupid or any of those kinds of things. I married her because she's a highly intelligent woman who's very capable, right? She's not a loser, and she's applying all of that energy to bless first her daughter, the future of our family, and she's making those long-term investments, right? Now, if she wants to go back to work in the future because she enjoys it, great, we'll do that, right? But she's decided, and we've decided that, it's much more fulfilling for her to put all that effort and energy into our home, right? And that's not for everyone, I get that. But the fact that she even has to combat this mentality of, I mean, I've literally had to like help her shed these negative beliefs that she's worthless now because she doesn't make money. You know what I mean? It's that pervasive, right? And I didn't do it to her, right? Critics will say, "Oh, you're like, lording over her and you made her quit and everything." And it was no, it was we had a very basic conversation of she came home every day stressed to the max, tired, totally checked out, and I was just very simple conversation of, "Hey, honey, this doesn't seem like it's blessing you. Are you enjoying what you're doing? It doesn't seem like you're able to get out of life what you wanted." And she said, "No, I'm not." So I basically gave her permission to quit. "Hey, honey, the money's great, of course, but you know what? We'll figure it out." And again, I know that's not for everyone, and I'm not saying it should be for everyone, but it should be an option that's actually celebrated and praised for probably most women. I think most women would prefer to be able to live in a way that they could focus on their own family first and nurture to the maximum extent. And here's why it's so important. A strong man needs to exist to create that possibility for her, because she can't become the full feminine without a strong, loving, supportive husband to cover and protect that environment for her, right? And the polarity of the two, the more masculine I become and the more feminine my wife becomes, the more our family wins. I am more blessed by her presence. She's more blessed by mine, and our daughter wins across the board. She gets to see what a loving husband looks like, so she knows what to expect in her future husband. She gets to see what a loving wife and mother looks like, what a nurturing, feminine character can look like, and she gets to mold into that. And so, this all or nothing world we live in of, women have to be all this and all that, and if they're not, they're a loser, or they're submitting to the patriarchy or whatever. It's all a intellectual, dishonest lie to trap people.
Dishonesty, 100%.
Yeah.
The same thing with the military. The same thing with the women in the military. Like, I know I have a bunch of Russian friends that I communicate to, and to them, right, they're going through war right now. Our conversations about women in the military, they're laughing at us. They're like, "What are you talking about?" It's of course they can be nurses maybe, but I don't want to have a woman on the front lines, because then I'll be thinking about her instead of thinking about my enemy.
Well, I mean, even we can even reduce this down to a more base level that isn't even necessarily combat, right? It's just like, just because something should it, right? Like, I am naturally not a very nurturing person. I'm a pretty cold, calculated. I can be an asshole. Like, that's something I have to rein in, right? Do you want me being a nurse to care for you? Like, I don't have good bedside manner or any of those kinds of things. And that's not necessarily because I'm a man, but it's just not something I'm suited to. Should I go into that to be progressive? No, I should double down on the things that I actually do well and provide maximum value to as many people as I can. So it's not even a male-female argument. It's just like, are you well suited to do said thing? No? Okay, maybe we shouldn't just make that the expectation then, right? It's this Looney Tunes land we've lived in that doesn't even have to be military, right? Because people, they struggle to see past the politics of the issue. At its base level, we should train children to maximize their strengths and understand, hey, like, I'm not good at math. I knew that about myself. I did okay in school. Like, I still got A's and stuff, but I hated it. I'm not inspired by it. I didn't like have this love of learning math, but I could write a 10-page paper in like a minute, So I played to my strengths, and I enjoy writing. I enjoy doing the things I do. We have pushed people. We've tried to jam people into a singular mold, and it's ludicrous because you water down people's talent where they're most effective to, push, a narrative or whatever. And so whether it's women in the military or this or that, or, can this job be done by them or that job, that's still missing the core point of whoever you are, male or female, you should maximize on your strengths to the fullest extent and try and align career, if you need a career, with your strengths, and just accept that I'm not good at these things. And this is really highlighted by the Clifton Strengths Finder. You can like do their course and read their program, all that kind of stuff. They basically, like, you can make it essentially a math equation where, like, let's say my ability to do public speaking is a 10, right? But my ability to do math is like a 1, okay? Well, if I spent 3 units of effort on trying to improve my math, I get 3. But if I spent 3 units of effort on improving my public speaking, 10 times 3 is 30, right? So it's a massively larger return of our investment of time, which is our most precious resource. So that's how we should really train kids. That's how we should promote wives and husbands to be, is the things that you're naturally better at, play to your strengths. And that's the beauty of, like, especially in marriage, my wife compliments me phenomenally. Like, on all the things that George sucks at, she's really good at. So we help each other out left and right. And it's not this, I'm lording over her and she's like chained to the radiator or something. It's a mutually supportive, beneficial relationship. And that's why a family exists in the first place. Now apply that to business. Now apply that to sports. Now apply that to every facet of our society. You don't even have to make it political. It's just a common sense thing that we have completely abandoned because we've been more concerned about like looking good than actually being good.
And that's where I think it's a conspiracy, because we shouldn't abandon common sense. How come that we came to the point as a culture, society, to just abandon common sense? Like you said, like playing to your strength is key, but that wasn't what we were taught. We're always taught, at least I was, oh, you got to work on this. Oh, you're not good at this. You got to...
Oh yeah, you're struggling at math, you need a tutor. You got to spend 4 extra hours every day on math. Why don't I just get passing grades and then instead spend those 4 hours on the things I'm really good at?
Yeah, and the grades shouldn't be
Crazy.
benchmark tests like they are right now.
Well, yeah, and it's also such a logical fallacy too, because I don't know about you, but I don't use any of my formal education professionally. I've never used it. You know the most valuable thing I've had to learn that's helped me in any career I've been? Adaptability. Learning as you go. F it, we're doing it live. That comfort with taking motion and failing fast and learning faster is the most important thing I've learned, and I didn't learn that from school. I had to learn it in the military. I had to do it in the military. I had to do it in the corporate world, and now I had to do it as an entrepreneur. And the universal thing there isn't how good I was at a particular school subject. It's how fast can I adapt and leverage other smarter, better people to be on my team or work with me or partner with me to cover down on my weaknesses. It's that simple.
I took that from somebody as a college dropout. I never regretted it, but then somebody asked me, like, do you regret not going to college and not getting a PhD? I'm like, I have 5 PhDs. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, they're right there in my office working for me. That's basically, I'm leveraging their brains and their education. I don't need to have one. I need to know how to leverage theirs.
Yeah. And so I'm not downplaying, like there are certain fields, obviously, that formal, like I want my doctor to have learned how to do surgery. Like I don't want some random dude just cutting me open. So I'm not discounting that for certain career fields and stuff, there absolutely needs to be formalized mastery over certain subjects. But for the bulk of us, many of the things we spent time doing in school or whatever didn't actually help us be better adults that can actually contribute value to society, right? I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about the emotional intelligence or the ability to recognize how to help someone with a skill set that you have or these kinds of things, right? So many of us are locked into this mentality of, I must do these things, then I must go to job, then I must, blah, blah, blah. And we're just like hamsters on a wheel, So
we're changing the paradigm.
Coming back to, independence and, ownership, it requires ownership. It requires you to reject victimhood and to take ownership of what you can control.
One of the most transformational books for me is right there. Extreme Ownership by Jocko.
Yeah, it's a good one.
The first 2 chapters are just mind-blowing when you read it and you realize, all right, this is what I was getting wrong all the time in my life. Jocko's, remember that speech by him? Good. When shit's not working out, good. Shit's going wrong,
right.
Good. It's an opportunity. It's a learning opportunity. Which brings me to the next segue, your elite Sentinel coaching. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I think it's a kind of good segue of what exactly you do there with men and why you started it and what the results you guys are getting right now.
So Elite Sentinel Coaching forges leaders to build legacies. That's our sole mission, and it's purely for men. And that's not because I'm anti-woman. It's just because, quite frankly, I think I would not be a good coach to women. So we focus on the men. And, I think it's number one, why was I needed all these things for me, right? If you've heard my story elsewhere, I struggled because I had a lack of understanding of what makes a good man, right? What actually makes a real man. I had a very false image of what that looked like, and I pursued a lot of the wrong things, and it forced me, and again, it's my fault. I'm not blaming anything. I acted in very negative ways, and I caused a lot of harm to a lot of people that I really care about. Now, I recognized how to fix that for myself, so I tried to extract all of that, those critical lessons that men need to know that are universal truths, regardless of your politics or those kinds of things. It's like, hey, you're a man with a family. You need to know these things, right? You must do these things to have a better life. So I distilled that down to a 12-week program. It is very, very well planned to give men actionable training so that they can take it and apply it independently throughout their lives. And the way it works is I teach you how to think, not necessarily what to think, right? We certainly give you tons of tactics, tons of strategies, all those types of things, right? Because men need to get in motion. But at the end of the 12 weeks, we train men to be independent so they don't need us. If you have to keep coming back to George asking for advice every single day, I have failed you. I am training you to go back out into your life and to understand that, okay, this situation is occurring. I don't necessarily have direct coaching to this one situation. However, I learned the principle, the mastery of how to handle this situation. I can figure this out. And then we build a true brotherhood for men, which is where most men find themselves today. They're isolated. And this causes them to feel salty. They're stressed, angry, lonely, tired, and yearning for a lot more. And it ties back to that stoicism thing, right? We think that stoic means zero emotion. And so men are cut off from other men. They have no real relationship, no vulnerability, no connection at a man-to-man level to really see each other and fill their own emotional batteries back up to recharge themselves. It's impossible to be a good husband and father if you're on empty. So the way that works is man-to-man, brotherhood. And so we build that through this program. They're done in groups of men at a time. It's not this one-off journey. You're going to do it with a team around you. And by the time you finish your 12 weeks, you now have access to a dedicated group of men who know everything about you. They've done all the same work as you. They're just as committed to growing and improving. And you may be from drastically different walks of life, and you'll realize that the lie that most men believe is that they're the only one. When in reality, we all struggle with the same, basically three things. It's our relationships, it's how we make money, and it's like interpersonal relationships or your childhood trauma, right? Those are like the top three things that most guys are struggling with. And you realize very quickly that, wow, my problem feels a lot less painful when I recognize that there's 15 other dudes who have this same problem and we're all solving it together now. And so that's what we foster for the men. We leverage all of our expertise and strengths, and it's not just me. I've got a team of coaches that are all experts in different, categories of life that I think men need to master. But that's what we exist to do, and that's how it works, and we've been having massive success with it, not because I'm some special dude. It's because this stuff works for men, and our society has done men a disservice of basically teaching them all the wrong things and having them focus on all the wrong things. And so we just align that for men so there's no guesswork. It's like, hey, trust the process for 12 weeks, and then you'll know all the answers to the test, right? Like, you won't need me in 12 weeks. So I hope that,
That's
again,
awesome.
like our podcast.
You just made me want to join.
Yeah, brother. Yeah, let's do it. But why I'm so passionate about it is, again, it's like the podcast. It's not about me or glorifying myself or that kind of, I don't care. I don't care if my name is remembered. That's why the logo doesn't have my face on it, right? It is intentionally not about me. But I want to make a cultural impact so that hopefully one day we don't have to exist. My ultimate goal would be that we're so successful and that men in America just understand what it means to be a good man, that we can close our doors forever and never need to coach men again. That would be fantastic. I'll reopen as, a business consulting group.
That will never happen.
So,
because I'll tell you, coaching is very important, actually. I've learned that. I was listening to Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins had an immense impact on my life and a lot of things.
Yeah, I mean,
and when
genius.
he said, yeah, he was 60, he's like almost 70 right now, but at that time he was 60 years old, or something change. And he said that he's got 3 coaches right now. And I was like, what? So he explained it like, without those 3 coaches, he wouldn't be as successful as he is right now.
Right.
So him being the master coach, he has 3 coaches himself.
Yeah, I have a coach. Michael Jordan had a coach. Kobe Bryant had a coach. Like, you being the best at something doesn't mean you don't need trainers and mentors, right? And here's another thing that why men struggle so much today. And again, it's not like I have all the answers, but most men today believe that you're just going to grow up, you become an adult, you're going to find a girl and get married and start a family, and you're going to have it all figured out, or that you're supposed to just know how to do it all by yourself. It's insane. It's the most important thing we should have a coach for. It's the most important thing we should have a team around us of other like-minded men who would be like, Hey, how are you handling this situation? Oh, I'm doing it like this. Oh, that's a great suggestion. I should try that too, right? We'll spend all this time and effort and consulting and coaching for sports and business and all these kinds of things, and then totally ignore the fact that our home life is a disaster. And so I would rather be, I don't want to be a public success and a private failure. I'd rather have the best family in the world, even if it means I sacrifice some career. Because at the end of the day, where's your real legacy built? It's not job. It's not money. It's not how many Bugattis you have, like Andrew Tate or whatever. It's not how many women you've slept with. Real legacy is leaving something for people or in people, not for them, right? It's not things. It's the human value you create in the lives of others. And so whoever you are, wherever you are as a man, you may not be called to being the next Elon Musk. I'm certainly not going to be. I'm not that smart. I couldn't do those types of things. Whatever your station in life is, if you align on your legacy first, how am I going to make the most impact in the people that matter most to me? Everything else works itself out. It is literally that simple. Occam's razor, cut to the most simple solution. If you invest in the people that actually matter in your life first, get coaches on how to do that better, everything else is kind of a collateral advantage, right? And so the guys who come through my program, most of them are doing it because they need to fix their marriage or, they need confidence and those kinds of things. A lot of them are getting promoted at work anyway because they naturally start showing up as this more confident, masculine dude who just takes care of business. And their boss is like, whoa, this guy's crushing it, promoted, or they're making more sales because they're showing up differently with clients. We're not teaching them sales strategies and gimmicks. It's just like a natural consequence of when you as a man grow and invest in your own personal development, everything in your life improves, but the most important area you should improve it for is your family, especially if you got kids, because your time is limited. Every day they're getting older, and the actions you take today have generational impacts, either positively or negative. So get it right.
The brotherhood aspect is really big for most men, I think, especially for men that kind of don't fit the mold. Think critically. They're all like me. We're to ourselves. We feel like Joe Rogan saved me when COVID was hit, and I thought I'm losing my mind because I'm looking at everything and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Everything is backwards. I didn't know who Joe Rogan was at that time, and then I discovered him, and he brought on Brett Weinstein, who was finally saying things that made sense to me. Because, okay, I'm not a doctor, but I read and I understand what, immune response is. And once you have a disease, you have that built in. And now all of a sudden, all these doctors online telling me that everything we knew about medicine doesn't longer apply. That if you have COVID and you have now immunity, you don't have immunity. I'm like, what? None of this makes sense anymore. What are you guys doing? And so I found Joe Rogan. I'm like, oh, thank goodness I'm not the only crazy one. There are other people out there questioning things. And it's the brotherhood that you have in the Elite Sentinel coaching, to me, is probably one of the biggest breakthroughs for those men.
Yeah.
That allow them to actually find other men like them so they don't feel like, oh, they're this crazy individual struggling with this on his own.
Yeah.
That, oh, actually, you know what? A bunch of us are, and nobody has a perfect marriage. I love my wife. I will probably murder for my wife if I had to. But at the same time, we fight like dog and cat sometimes. There's no escaping that. The only rule we have is we never do it in front of kids. That's it. That's like the only rule we have. But we have fights. It happens. It's a marriage. And also, I think if you don't have fight, that means you don't give a shit about each other. I think that's where it's at that level. If a family never has arguments, that means you no longer care enough to actually have that. But you mentioned two men. I wanted to give a little bit of my take on both of them. So let's start with Andrew Tate, who actually fooled me a little bit in the beginning because he had this amazing podcast with PBD, and he spoke all this crazy awesomeness about the Matrix and how we need to bring people up and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, I really like this guy, And I also don't care about how people make their bones, because when you're growing up and given where he came from, so he made his money and wealth as a pornographer, sort of, right?
Yep.
Okay, fine. To me, I don't judge. What I judge is what you do now with that influence and fame that you got. The way you got famous, I will let it go. It's like in Godfather when he said, hey, it doesn't really matter to me what you do, what a man does for a living. So the way I look at it, like, I don't really judge guys when they make their bones, coming from nothing into something. What I do evaluate is what you do with that influence now. And now I can evaluate Andrew Tate for being a POS, because what he does with that influence is not something that I would want my son to look up to. And so from that perspective, Andrew Tate is not somebody that I consider. I lost you there, George. Did you hear me? Okay, you're back. And Elon Musk, on the other hand, is also someone that is. I always said that this guy gives me hope. Gives me hope because of one thing, and I'll explain to you what that is. But he's not somebody that I would want my son to be, for instance, because he's a very unhappy person. He was on Joe Rogan's. He told Joe, like, he can't turn off that spigot. He wouldn't want that on anybody. That non-stop flow of ideas and information in his head. He's an extremely, extremely unhappy individual, unfortunately. That comes with the territory of being so prolific and productive. Because somebody who is happy with their life will not be working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week, which is what this guy is doing. With everything he has in his life, he's still working like a workaholic, age 50 plus, having successfully built amazing companies. He can't stop that. This is who he is, and it's not a happy medium to be in. But Elon gives me hope for one reason. And most people, and you guys had Nolan Arba on your podcast, even though you weren't on that podcast.
Yeah, I had to miss it, unfortunately, but yeah.
The first NeuraLink guy. And I was thinking about this for many, many years. I understand that AI is inevitable and AGI is inevitable. And I was always worried, like, we're not doing anything as a society to be ready for that. What if it has nefarious ideas? Because we're not going to know that it has nefarious ideas. It's going to be so smart, it's not going to tell us, hey, I'm about to kill you guys, so why don't you nuke the data center?
It'll work in deception,
Absolutely. And Elon was the first person to actually say that out loud on his first appearance on Joe Rogan, and as the reason why he created NeuraLink. Because he said that if you can't beat him, you got to join him. And I envision NeuraLink to be something that, not in first iteration, obviously. First few phases will be medically related, but then when it becomes symbiotic with AI, I think most likely they're going to implant it in military men first.
Yeah, you can. I was going to say you're going to get like very, Warhammer 40K dystopian type stuff. Let's build
100%. That's how it's going to be done.
And, yeah, I mean, we'll see.
You're going to have universal soldiers. You're going to have universal soldiers because they will need to evaluate, being enhanced versions, what the threat of this thing that's coming is, and they have to be on par. They have to be on parity and level of thinking, because otherwise, AI is going to just outperform us. So now I think it's a race between NeuraLink and AGI, and that's where a lot of these people quitting OpenAI. It's a good thing in my opinion, but it's also very alarming because they're quitting from safety and trust portion of OpenAI.
Yeah.
So obviously something Sam Altman is doing is not very safe.
Right.
He's pushing progression of this without concern for safety. I obviously take Elon's word where he says, he called him Littlefinger. The guy that betrays everybody, is the only one standing in the end. And it's very concerning. And that's why Elon gives me a lot of hope, because he's the only person that actually takes this challenge on, realizing, hey, AI is such a big threat. Even if it's a 20% chance, this is a humongous threat to entire civilization.
Right.
And we're not treating it as such. And finally this week, once the Chinese released DeepSeek, everybody realized, oh, it is a competition, because we always thought that we're so much ahead of everybody. We're dominating. We don't need to rush. No, we're not ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
AI experts say that we're about 3-4 months ahead of the Chinese on the development of AI. David Sachs, who is the AI czar right now from the All In podcast, he was just on, I forgot which show on Fox News, where he said that we thought that we're about 8 to 10 months ahead.
Yeah, it's like half that.
We just realized, we're only 3 to 4 months ahead of the Chinese, and they're catching up quick. So AI to me is incredibly important, and we need to incorporate that into the way we raise kids, understanding that they're going to live with AI.
Yeah.
Not kind of, when ChatGPT came out, the first thing I did is I told my son, all right, we got to start doing things with it, because now it's fun, it's actionable. First thing he did is he created a book using ChatGPT. He published it on Amazon. Now he's a 3 times published author, leveraging AI.
That's funny.
Leveraging Amazon. Yeah, because he needs to learn how to do it. And every day, I want 2 things out of him. I want him to do something using AI, and I want something physical, right? I want to work out, a hockey practice, or a gym or something. So those 2 requirements per day from him. Leverage AI every day and physicality every single day, because I want him to build that discipline that I never had growing up.
Yeah.
Because nobody explained to me how important it is to work out every single day.
Yeah.
And I still struggle with my commitment to exercise. No matter how good I feel about it, I have days where I'm like, I don't feel like doing it. And then the next day I always regret it.
Sounds like you need a battle buddy for accountability.
I told you, I like your program. I like your program.
Yep.
I've listened to it on when you discussed it on Zubies.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I could use something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because an accountability coach or partner or somebody that keeps
Yeah.
you accountable.
And so, like, back to your example of, wow, I'm totally blanking on his name right now. Tony Robbins, of having coaches, right? Yeah, he's one of the most successful men in the world, right? And he has 3 coaches. And so, like, there's this other logical fallacy we have of like, oh, well, when I'm in crisis, then I'll get help. And it's like, well, hang on. What if, again, kind of going back to that like effort equation that I kind of talked about with the strength finder thing, if your marriage is at a 7 right now and you're like, hey, we're doing pretty good, how much more could you amplify things because you're not in crisis? If you grew right now as a man, how much more of an impact could you make in your marriage, with your kids, in your business, your career, whatever it is, if you're not, on death's door, or you're on your last leg, right? You actually have a lot of energy and capability at your disposal. Hey, you're going to take everything that we teach you and amplify it, exponentially more. How much better is life going to look for you in 12 weeks? So there's this other like fallacy that a lot of us have adopted where, oh, well, I'm not suffering, so I don't need help. I'm like looking for help and feedback everywhere I go now. Like I never want to drift back to being like, okay, I want to be exceptional everywhere I go, because average sucks. Average today means depressed, overweight, stressed out, in a job you hate. Like I want nothing to do with average, not because I'm this elite person, but I'm going to try my best to stay above average in all aspects of my life. And so, that's, maybe I'm not your coach. Maybe I'm not the best fit for you. That's fine. Go find someone who is. It's insane to wait till your marriage is about to be over before you get help for it, right? Or it's insane to wait till you're wanting to, potentially end your own life because you're so depressed and so stressed that then you seek help. Like, let's do it before we ever even get near those outcomes, right? And so you see that with Tony Robbins as a great example. He knows that the way to continue being super successful and fulfilled with what he's doing is to leverage the best people that can push him and direct him, even though he's highly successful. He's a very smart guy. He's obviously figured out a lot of things. Doesn't mean he doesn't need a team around him. So, to all the men out there, wherever you are, maybe my program isn't the right fit for you, but you need to engage with other men at a minimum. You need some honest conversation with other guys that you can say things like, man, I'm really struggling with my marriage right now, and I honestly don't know what to do about it. Just have that conversation and watch how much power happens between you, man to man. Because he'll be like, dang, I've struggled too, man. Let's figure this out together. You will naturally find better solutions simply because you're talking it out with a guy who cares about you before you go do the thing in your marriage. So like a great example there is, like, I call it, Brandon Blinson, my co-host. He's also part of the team in Elite Sentinel. Like, when I'm struggling with something, I call him and I'm like, man, it's this, this, and this. What do you think? He gives me valuable feedback. Then I'm not like stressed out and arguing with my wife. I'm actually coming as, this whole stoic guy who's thought through what he wants to say and why, as opposed to just emotionally puking all over my wife, right? So there's a lot of value from the brotherhood aspect. And then real quickly, like with the Andrew Tate example, see, this is the warning sign for everyone out there, right? You need to really look at why someone is doing what they're doing. What is the motivation? Because at face value, Andrew Tate, not so much anymore, used to say a lot of kind of good things, right? Oh, the Matrix and this, and men should work hard and men should do these things. I agree. They should. You should work hard. You should be physically fit. You should try and produce value, blah, 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 all those kinds of things. But what's his motivation? What is Andrew Tate trying to do? Andrew Tate is trying to glorify Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate is trying to make Andrew Tate richer. Andrew Tate is trying to extort others, and he literally did it as a career, extorting women, to amass wealth for himself. There is nothing in there that says strong masculine leader. Because a strong masculine leader doesn't care about himself. He understands that the way that he actually gets fulfilled and actually makes real impact is by doing it for others, right? So I do this program not to line my pockets and get Ferraris, but to help other men live the life that I was luckily able to get through a decade of hard work. And I'm trying to give it to them as fast as possible so they can go and amplify it and have better marriages, better families, better careers. You know, I mean, it is mission focused. It's about everyone but me. And then everything else I do in life, right? The volunteer work I do or the investments in my family, it's not about making my name greater. It's about giving what I can to the maximum extent for the sake of others. And that's real leadership. And that's what a character like Andrew Tate misses. And that's why he's leading so many men astray. It's because they think that, oh, to be a good man means you got to get rich and have sex with as many women as possible. Okay, that's what like teenage George did. That's what teenage George tried to do. That's not masculinity. That's selfish teenage mentality.
I love it, man. I think it's a great way to end the podcast on this note. Thank you very much for coming on, taking the time out of your day, man, and speaking to me.
Well, Zach, thanks for having me on and for the great conversation. We covered a lot here, man. It was fun. And I know that you're a very well-read man, a well-thought-out man. And so it's just great to have conversation with a guy like yourself.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you very much for your time, George.
Yeah, brother.
Talk to you soon.
God bless, man. Thanks.